to make a handle for this teapot, I'm going to use a lot more clay than I would usually use to make a mug handle, and that's just because I need a much bigger handle. So this is, I don't know, probably a pound, maybe a pound and a half of clay. And I am going to pull this handle, but I'm going to do it a little differently because it's pretty hard learning how to pull such a big handle. And I think really your best bet when starting off is doing as much of the prep work for this as possible and pulling it against the table. So I'm starting by just getting this piece of clay into kind of a, I don't know, like a fat chili pepper shape. I'm trying to get one end of this to be a little bit more narrow and pointed, and to do this I'm rolling it back and forth between my hands. I'm also using my thumb if I have any bumps or grooves. I'm using that to smooth it out. You can roll this against the table a little bit. And I think I'm going to start by working on top of a piece of wood or drywall board, something that is a little more porous than a piece of plastic. And I'm going to start stretching this. And to do that, I'm patting this against the table, and as it hits the table, I'm pulling back towards my body a little bit. And then I'm going to flip it and do the same thing. So as you can see, this is starting to flatten the shape. But it's also starting to stretch it because as it hits the table, I'm pulling back towards me. So I'm getting a little bit more of a belt shape rather than the original rounded kind of chili pepper shape. So now that I have the clay a little close to the shape I want it to be in, I'm going to move to a surface that's less porous. So this is just a piece of thick plastic. You could also work directly on a tabletop if it is maybe a material other than wood. And I'm starting to get this a little wet with a sponge, and I'm going to begin to stretch this. So I have a damp sponge to help keep it from sticking, and I'm starting to wrap the sponge around this and pull back towards my body. I have the sponge kind of wrapped around the clay, and my fingers are pushing on the top and the sides. And this is starting to stretch into a longer belt shape. I'm frequently flipping it because I want to keep this nice and even. And this is a lot wider than I need it to be, but I would prefer to start pulling for length before I pull the sides to be a little bit more narrow. I can always make that a little thinner. As it stretches, it will get more narrow. Okay, and I'm going to do the last pull or two with my hands, just trying to stretch this belt to be a little bit less wide, like that. So that's looking pretty good. Keep in mind that teapots are going to be heavy, so you really do need a pretty substantial handle. It needs to be, you know, at least half an inch thick or so, because it's going to be easy for this to break off. And you also really need it to be wide enough to be something you can really get a grip on. So that is looking pretty good to me. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and put this on a surface that's a little more absorbent so it doesn't stick. I'm going to go ahead and bend this into the final shape I need and clip off some of that extra clay. And I really like to let my handles dry in kind of this upside down J shape. And then you can either let this air dry if you have time, or of course hit it with a hair dryer. But it is really important that you get it to a nice leather hard state before you attach it to your teapot.